So good holy and good afternoon, everyone. I am Aliana Kedaraman.
Good holy everyone. My name is Carmela T. Ebalye and we are going to report the Indigenous curriculum.
So indigenous curriculum or indigenous education specifically focuses on teaching indigenous knowledge, models, methods, and content within formal or non-formal educational system. But before that, let us identify or discuss what are indigenous people. So indigenous peoples are differentiated social and cultural groups with collective ancestral ties to their lands and sa kanilang natural resources at kung saan sila nakatira. So according to Walter 2016 mentioned by Ganal 2017, indigenous peoples are known to be as the first people, original people, and native people that are ethnic groups who are came down and identified with the original inhabitants of the region. So in the integrated report by the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous Peoples in Philippines, there are about 110 peoples communities numbering between 15 million to 20 million, wherein 30% in Luzon and less than 10% in Visayas and more than 60% in Mindanao. So since the Philippines has a large number of indigenous people, the government to the Department of Education had developed the curriculum to cater the rights of these indigenous people to have an education. So the Department of Education or DepEd has initiated the development of education curriculum that was designed to meet the learning needs of the indigenous peoples or IPs communities. Meaning, binibigyan ng opportunities ng DepEd yung indigenous peoples or IPs para mabigyan ng sapat na edukasyon at ma-meet yung learning needs nila doon. So, the most recently developed curriculum for IP learners, this is the Indigenous People Education Curriculum Framework. According to DepEd Order Number 32, Series of 2015, this curriculum framework ay sumasang-ayon siya sa DepEd Order Number 62, Series of 2011, entitled Adopting Indigenous People Education or IPED Policies Framework. In DepEd Order Number 42, Series of 2013, entitled as Implementing Rules and Regulation of Public Act Number 100533 or otherwise known as Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. So before we discuss truly the IP or Indigenous People curriculum, let us first identify one issues which pressed the Department of Education to create the said curriculum. Now, what is this issue? So, in the consolidated reports by the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous People, discrimination is being experienced into two ways. It could be from the people and from the education itself. So, according to Ganal 2007, the UNESCO confirmed that millions of children are taught in the languages na hindi nila ginagamit o naintindihan. So, in participation sa pag-design ng curricula is limited lamang. Kaya yung mga IP learners ay tinuturuan ng iba't ibang languages na hindi nila alam o naiintindihan. So, nang dahil dito is naka-experience sila ng or naka-encounter sila ng iba't ibang klase ng discrimination mula sa nakakarami who reinforce stereotypes about this experience like being backward. Example dito is yung hindi fair yung pagtrato sa'yo dahil sa gender identity, race, or ethnicity, especially inside the classroom. And civilized or pagiging ignorante. So, I have one question. How to address this kind of issue? So, si DepEd ay may sariling paraan on how to solve this issue. In DepEd Order Number 32, Series of 2015, it states that the needs for teachers serving in indigenous communities to be adequately oriented and trained so that indigenous cultures are appreciated and indigenous cultural practices and values are not discriminated as backward, inferior, invalid, or primitive. So, as a teacher, dapat maging sensitive ka. You should create a welcoming environment inside the classroom And you should be diverse sa kung ano man yung ituturo mo sa mga bata. Kasi as a teacher, makaka-encounter tayo or salamuha tayo ng iba't ibang culture, tradition, and dapat as a teacher maging fair at equal ka sa pag-treat ng mga estudyante mo para maiwasan din yung discrimination at at kagaya nga ng sinabi dito and ma-practice yung values natin na hindi matawag na backward, inferior, invalid, or primitive. So, now, with regards to use of language for instruction as one form of prejudice and discrimination, the former DepEd secretary said that DepEd values indigenous languages in the implementation of mother tongue-based multilingual education or MTB or MLE among indigenous learners is in order to regenerate and enrich the community's indigenous knowledge systems and practices, or IKSPS, and Indigenous Learning Systems, or ILS. So meaning, yung RA number 100533, or Enhanced Basic Education, directs DepEd para sumunod sa mga principles and framework ng mother tongue-based multilingual education sa pagbuo ng isang curriculum development. Kindergarten and grade 1 to 3 learners ay required na makareceive ng instruction, teaching materials, at assessment sa kanilang respective regional or native language. Now, to discuss the Indigenous People Education Curriculum, this aims to, first, is recognize the right of Indigenous people to basic education, which is culturally rooted and response. Ang IPED Curriculum Framework is naghahangad sila na magbigay ng guidance sa schools and other educational program, both public and private, as they engage with indigenous communities in localizing, indigenizing, and enhancing the K-12 curriculum base sa kanilang respective educational and social context. Second is, it is also establishes institutionalized partnership between indigenous communities and their respective schools or learning programs which serves them. This is also to be followed through sustainable community engagement which guarantees the meaningful participation of indigenous committees in the recognition of indigenous knowledge systems and practices, indigenous learning system in the basic education curriculum. So next is, through DepEd's Bureau of Alternative Learning System or BALS, the Alternative Learning System or ALS curriculum for IPs was developed in response to the EFA or Education for All campaign to provide the basic learning needs for all marginalized learners. Meaning, yung ALS kasi is binibigyan niya ng opportunities yung mga out-of-school youth para makapag-aral at mabigyan ng sapat na edukasyon. So kaya pinapartner siya sa IPs or indigenous people kasi yung indigenous people is nasa rural. So yung nasa rural place kasi is hindi kasi lahat is nabibigyan ng sapat na edukasyon. Kaya yung ALS is binibigyan niya ng opportunity yung mga tao doon para makapag-aral, maka-experience na pumunta sa paaralan at mabigyan talaga ng sapat na edukasyon yung mga bata o yung mga tao doon para hindi sila mabihind sa atin. Kasi tao din sila, gusto nilang makapag-aral. So why not ibigay sa kanila yung gusto nila na maka-experience na makapag-aral. So di ba? So the next slide will be discussed by Miss Carmela Ibalye.
So indigenous people, the IP curriculum or the IP education curriculum for the ALS was developed in the year 2006 in coordination with National Commission on Indigenous People or the NCIP and was validated by various indigenous cultural communities in the Philippines. The IP curriculum is to be implemented by trained ALS implementers with IP learners. So, yung ating IP education curriculum for ALS is na-develop siya noong 2006. And it was stated here na dapat yung mag-implement ng IP curriculum is yung mga trained ALS implementers or di kaya yung mga trained ALS teachers. So the learning competencies of the IP curriculum were drawn from the existing ALS curriculum for the basic literacy, elementary, and secondary levels. The curriculum content, however, was based on the Indigenous People Rights Act, or the IPRA, or Republic Act RA number 8371. The educational goal of the IP curriculum is the attainment of the functional literacy for the IPs. So yung IP curriculum natin is nanggaling siya doon sa existing ALS curriculum, which is include yung basic literacy from elementary and secondary level. At saka, yung IP curriculum naman natin is based siya sa Indigenous People Rights Act or yung Republic Act number 8371. So yung goal lang naman nito is the attainment of functional literacy. So yung basic literacy lang yung parang main goal ng IP curriculum. So the IP curriculum reflects on the core areas of the IP's concerns, such as the following. So we have here the 5 core areas of the IP concerns. First one is the family life. The second one is the health, sanitation, and nutrition, followed by the civic consciousness, and then economics and income, and lastly is the environment. So family life. It touches on the life of an IP as a member of the family from birth to death. So parang it delegates or it portrays the varying roles of the members of the family and kung paano ito nakaka-affect sa bawat individual ng buong ICC with their respective domain. So the other one is the health, sanitation, and nutrition. This brings into fore the IP's concept of self and the environment and how each interplays with the other. So these core areas will feature the indigenous practices, knowledge, and local belief on hygiene, health, and food. Ang core na to is magdi-discuss rin siya ng mga common health issues confronting the IPs brought about by their unique geographical locations as well as their situations. So the third one is the civic consciousness. It highlights the rich worldview of the IP ranging from their lifeways, identity, and history. So these core areas will loaded heavily with their aspiration, needs, and sentiments as a people. Ang core area na ito is mai-include din yung provision ng RA number 8371 or the IPRA in which ito yung magdadala ng consciousness sa mga IP kung ano yung batas na meron sila. It will enlighten them about the right they have. So, for our fourth one is the economics and income. It presents the system of community management of supply and demand among the IP. So, ang core area na ito will features the IP's form of earning a living and caring for the communal service of life and livelihood. So this will help the IP and educate them on how to make living and at kung gaano ito ka-importante sa pang-araw-araw nilang pamumuhay. So the last one is the environment. It deals with the IP's communion with nature. It stresses their strong attachment to the environment. So sa core area na ito, ipinapakita kung gaano kahalaga ang environment. Because kung mapapansin natin, ang ating mga kababayang katutubo, sila talaga yung merong strong attachment sa ating environment. So this core area will help them understand the connection between them and the environment that surrounds them. So yun lang yung nasa ating IP curriculum core areas. Next one is the core learning competences that are reflected in the learning strand of the IP curriculum. So, meron tayong mga learning strands in which core learning competencies din ito sa IP curriculum. We have 5. The first one is the learning strand 1, communication skills. So, this strand aims to develop the ability of the IP learners to access, critically process and effectively make use of available information in a variety of media. So this learning strand give all the IPs the ability to access available information sa kung anong uri ng media yung available sa kanila. Kasi pag sinabi nating IP, syempre nasa mga bulubunduking bahagi sila, ibig sabihin, pahirapan din yung internet connections. And the possible media na maaaring nila gamitin is books. So this strand will help them develop their communication skills through available resources like books. And it will enable them to function effectively as a member of the family, community, nation, and the world. Letter B, it would also actively participate in community and economic development. Kasi nga, pag alam na nila kung paano makipag-communicate ng maayos, is there are chances na kaya na nilang mag-participate sa anumang programs, hindi lang pang national, kundi pati na rin pang global. So for our learning strand number 2, problem solving and critical thinking. So this strand aims to enable the IP learners to be aware of their own thinking, make critical and informed decisions, defend their ideas, evaluate the ideas of others, and strive for new ways of solving problems, and do all this in an atmosphere of community and consensus building. So this strand will help them becoming a good problem solver and good decision maker. If kasi alam nila kung paano mag-solve ng problems as well as gumawa ng tamang decision and kaya na nilang i-defend yung mga ideas nila, is they are able to enhance their personal social effectiveness and mai-improve din yung quality of life na meron sila. So for our number 3 or letter C, the learning strand 3, which is the development of self and a sense of community. So this strand aims to help the IP learners acquire a positive sense of self and a sense of community that will lead to the development of their potentials and enable them to live harmoniously together with others. So this learning strand will enlighten them about their full potential as an individual na hindi dapat nila ikahiya kung sino at kung ano ang mayroon sa kanila. For letter D, the learning strand 4, practice of ecological sustainable economics. So this learning strand aims to help the IP learners achieve responsible well-being and ensure active participation in the economic life of the community. So this learning strand will help them understand that their life and their existence is naka-anchored siya sa well-being and sa resources on which the community depends. Dapat masustain nila yung pangangailangan nila. So for our letter E, the learning strand number 5, expanding one's worldview. So this strand aims to provide an atmosphere for the IP learners to participate and practice freely their own culture at the same time to be equipped with basic competences to face the challenges of a global community and the influx of change. So this learning strand will help them understand that na-i-appreciate kung ano man yung meron sila. They should be proud of who they are and kung anong meron sa kanila. Para naman, if kasi pag na-possess nila yung ganung characteristics, is magiging handa na sila sa anumang problema pwedeng dumating sa buhay nila. So the IP curriculum is supported by learning resources that are written in mother tongue. So presently, 13 of the basic literacy level materials are in 8 mother tongue and are being used in selected community learning centers. So mostly yung IP curriculum natin is yung learning resources na ginagamit nila is nakasulat siya sa mother tongue. It is for them to understand well kasi pag ginamit kasi yung mother tongue, mas madaling maiintindihan ng learners kung ano yung gustong ituro ng teachers kasi yun na yung mga language na nakasanayan nila. But it depends pa rin sa kung anong tribe yung mapupuntahan ng IP curriculum natin. So, basta lang yung learning resources is dapat siyang nakasulat sa mother tongue. And that's all for IP curriculum or the Indigenous People curriculum. And I hope na sana ay may nakuha kayo or meron kayong new learnings na nakuha sa report na to. So, thank you and once again, good food.